Okay, get out your vocab sheets because we'll have some vocab words today. Okay, if-then statements show a cause and effect. This table shows some if-then statements. If it is raining, then it is spring. Is this a true or false statement? False. It doesn't have to be spring if it is raining. If x and y are whole numbers, then their difference, x minus y, is a whole number. True or false? 4 and 2 are whole numbers. 4 minus 2 is 2, which is a whole number. But what if we go 2 and 4 are whole numbers? What's 2 minus 4? Negative 2. Negative 2 is not a whole number. Negative 2 is an integer, so this one is false. If water is heated, then it boils. True or false? False. It doesn't have to boil. It can just be heated a little bit. If a triangle has a right angle, then it is a right triangle. True. That's true. Okay. If your favorite color is blue, then you're a good speller. False. You don't have to be a good speller even if your favorite color is blue. All right. So, a conditional, we're going to talk about conditional statements. A conditional is an if-then statement that relates a hypothesis to a conclusion. So, just say an if-then statement that relates a hypothesis to a conclusion. That's the conditional. So the conditional is an if-then statement that relates a hypothesis to a conclusion. That's what you write down for conditional. Then the hypothesis is the part that follows the if. Conclusion is the part that follows the then. Okay? So those are 3 vocab words, and we'll have a few more coming up. Okay, conditionals can be represented using an arrow. P, arrow Q means if P, then Q. Like, if a triangle has a right angle, then it's a right triangle. Okay, that's a conditional statement, an if-then statement. Okay? Write this as a conditional statement. You can register to vote if you are at least 18 years old. This is the hypothesis. So you would say, if you are at least 18 years old, then you can register to vote. Okay? So the hypothesis is the part that follows the if. So this is the hypothesis. And your conclusion would be you can register to vote. Okay? All right. So, where's your hypothesis for this one? If my teacher assigns an essay, I will type it out. Which part is your hypothesis, Ashton? My teacher assigns an essay is the hypothesis. For B, what is your hypothesis, Sydney? What? For part B, I typed my essay. I typed my essay as a hypothesis for statement B. Okay. A truth value of a statement is a true or false value according to whether the statement is true or false, respectively. So, this is the definition for truth value. And then truth table lists all the possible combinations for truth values of two or more statements. All right. We're not going to spend much time on truth tables. If the hypothesis leads to a conclusion they're both true, then the statement will be true. If a true leads to a false, then it'll be false. If a false leads to a true, it's true. If they're both false, it's true. I'm not gonna test you over that because I don't like how they present that. So, how can you determine the truth value of the conditional? If a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. True or false? That's true. So you'll be having to do that on some of these. All right, here's your next 4 vocab words. And then I'll talk about them when you're done writing them. Okay, so let's say we have a conditional statement of if I live in Madison, then I live in Lake County. Is that a true or false statement? That is a true statement. I should say Madison, South Dakota. Then we'd make sure it's true. That's a true statement. Okay. The converse is you switch the hypothesis and conclusion around. So the converse would be if I live in Lake County, South Dakota, then I live in Madison, South Dakota. True or false? False. Because even though you live in Lake County, it doesn't mean you have to live in Madison. You could live out the lake. You could live in Chester. You can live in Rutland, whatever. But the converse isn't always true. A negation is then it's the opposite of it. So if you look at inverse, it's the opposite of the hypothesis and the opposite of the conclusion in that order. So for the inverse, it would say, if I do not live in Madison, South Dakota, then I do not live in Lake County. True or false? That's false. Because if you don't live in Madison, you could live in Chester and still live in Lake County. So that's a false statement. Contrapositive is basically the knots of the converse. So you take the converse and put knots in them. So if I do not live in Lake County, South Dakota, then I do not live in Madison, South Dakota. True or false? That's a true statement. Because if you don't live in Lake County, you cannot live in Madison. Because Madison is within Lake County. All right. If you play the trumpet, then you play a brass instrument. Let's look at the converse of that. The converse would be if you play a brass instrument, then you play the trumpet. True or false? False. The original statement was true. If you play the trumpet, then you play the brass instrument. But its converse is false. Now, will it always change? No. Sometimes they'll both be true. Writing to determine the truth value of the inverse and contrapositive of this. If two whole numbers are even, then their sum is even. That's definitely a true statement. Okay? The inverse of it is if two whole numbers are not both even, then their sum is not even. True or false? False, because you could have two numbers that are both odd, 1 and 3 are both odd, but their sum is going to be even. Contrapositive would be if the sum of two whole numbers is not even, then the two whole numbers are not both even. True or false? This one is actually true. If the sum of two whole numbers are not even, so it's an odd sum, then the two whole numbers are not both even. That's true. One is even, one is odd. Okay, so that's a true statement. I think this is the last vocab word of the day. A biconditional is a combination of a conditional and its converse. That's what you should write. A combination of a conditional and its converse. The important thing here, and you don't have to write this down as part of your description of it, is if and only if for a biconditional. Okay, if today is Wednesday, then tomorrow is Thursday. Now, this only works if if it's written this way is true and the converse is true. So the converse of this would say, if tomorrow is Thursday, then today is Wednesday. That's a true statement, right? And this statement, if today is Wednesday, then tomorrow is Thursday, is a true statement. If both the statement and its converse are true, then we can write it as a biconditional, which we don't have the if here, and we don't have a then there. So we say, today is Wednesday if and only if tomorrow is Thursday. Now you could switch that around and say tomorrow is Thursday if and only if today is Wednesday. Either one of those works. But the key part of a biconditional is if and only if is in the middle. And you only have one statement there. A triangle is equilateral if and only if it has three congruent sides. So what are the two conditionals for that? So we're going to break apart the biconditional. So if a triangle is equilateral, then it has three congruent sides. That's the first statement. And the other statement would say, if a triangle has three congruent sides, then it is equilateral. Okay? So that's what your first assignment covers. We are second bell this week, so you have time to work on this and get some of it done before lunch. Don't just cash things in right now and say, oh, it's too close to lunch, I'm not going to work. No, because we're doing another section after lunch, so we need to get going on this.